Bernard Arnault, owner of LVMH and one of the world's wealthiest people, valued at $213 billion, is also known as the Wolf in Cashmere. Is he trying to make a move for Cartier and Richemont as a whole? Today with me, I have David Haettenschwiller to talk about this. David actually used to live down the street from Richemont and we used to walk by it every single day. David, how's it going today?
Doing very well. Thank you so much for having me back. Honestly, it's nice to be back on set, get away from the hustle and the bustle of the sales floor, and get to the answers. People want answers.
People want answers, and we have the truth.
Yeah.
So there are rumors that he's going after Cartier, going after Richemont as a whole. We talked about this offline, where it could potentially be a monopoly and be turned down as a deal. Let's start the conversation with who is Bernard Arnault, why he's known as the Wolf in Cashmere, and some of the things that he's gotten, accomplished in his life and some of his strategy, which is really, really interesting. So he started working at his father's construction company as, a child or a teenager or a young man. In 1976, he convinced his father to liquidate the construction company and to take over Christian Dior.
Yeah, which is tough. I mean,
how does that happen?
Yeah, right. So, hey, pops, I think we need to switch directions. I know we know a lot about construction, but hey, women's leather goods and luxury. Let's take all your hard work, your life savings, and pour it into basically a financially desolate brand. And I mean, I guess it paid out in the end.
It definitely did, but I wonder if it wasn't I wonder if that's an exaggeration where he didn't actually liquidate. If he was like, hey, pops, can I borrow some money and buy this brand now?
A small loan of a small loan of $1 million, or
you told me that he didn't actually just acquire Christian Dior, that it was a hostile takeover, and one of his, obviously his first and one of many that he's going to have in the future.
Yeah, so essentially the gentleman that owned, so I guess he started with Christian Dior first, and then he was brought in by a gentleman, Racamay, I think is it.
I'll say it the English way.
And he was actually the chairman and CEO of LVMH at the time. So he brought, I guess he saw something in Bernard Arnault that would help prevent a hostile takeover from the Moet family, and as well from the Guinness family, right? Because they were involved in the luxury spirits category.
At this time already, Arnault had a growing brand with Dior, and he had the money to come in and hopefully save Racamay from being taken over by Moet Hennessy. And this was, again, where he got the nickname Wolf in Cashmere. He said, absolutely, I'm down, let's do this. Turned over one night and went with Moet Hennessy and ended up kicking Racamay out of the company.
Right. That's crazy. So he basically got put in a position where he was able to know all the insides of the company and then go to the enemy, essentially change camps and use their leverage to do a buyout, which is I think is insane. It's
funny,
brilliant, but it's really gutless.
So the story goes they were sitting there, getting all the paperwork ready to present, him joining LVMH in the fight against Moet Hennessy and Guinness. And his lawyer goes to me, no, probably be, an interesting turn of events if instead of joining Racamay, you actually joined, Moet Hennessy Guinness and took over on that end and kicked Racamay out. He was like, it's really going against what I was brought in to do, but it's a really good idea. Yeah. Let's do it.
If it makes sense. Hey, it's not personal. It's just business. But
vicious.
But on a personal level, because Racamay, he actually had, he had precedent to have Louis Vuitton, because he was married to the great granddaughter of Louis Vuitton, of course the founder of the brand several hundred years ago. And I mean, just to basically get essentially your family business and your birthright, not your birthright, but something from your bloodline, to get that ripped away is got to be devastating. Well, he landed on his feet. He bought Lanvin, right, which is a successful French brand.
And it's a Chevalier. This is the existing the head of LVMH at the time.
Correct. Yes.
That got kicked. No, Racamay.
Racamay got kicked out. Chevalier
was the one with Moet Hennessy and
exactly.
Guinness.
Yes. Yeah. And then he passed away, unfortunately. He was an older gentleman, but and then now it's the Arnault family group that essentially holds.
So I listened to this one podcast, which is an amazing story about this whole thing, and as he's negotiating, and as he's telling Rakame, yes, I'm with you, he's secretly buying up more and more and more LVMH stock to hold a stronger position, and then just stabs him in the back.
Yeah, this has happened as well too with Hermes as well, where he's buying Hermes stock, and then he just shows up one day, hey, it's me. It's kind of like your neighbor that you don't want, but you kind of have to tolerate them because there's nothing you can do. I mean, he's never going to relinquish those stocks unless you give him an offer. Well, of course, unless he has it all, right?
Of course. So Arnault went on to obviously join LVMH and head LVMH. And acquire numerous brands, including Tiffany & Co., Fendi, Givenchy, Marc Jacob.
Fenty as well.
Fenty by Rihanna?
Fenty by Rihanna. Actually, Fenty, really? He bought Fenty by Rihanna, I guess, undisclosed amount, but it's the first fashion label, first of all, for a person of color, and the first fashion label in 30 years that they've bought. So it's relatively new. So Fenty Cosmetics and fashion.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
As far as watches, they have Hublot, they have Tag Heuer, they have Bulgari, Zenith.
Yes, Zenith as well, and there's a big push on their end to kind of popularize Louis Vuitton watches. So they're actually doing high horology now, where you have amazing pieces at really high horology price points, in the hundreds of thousands.
I gotta say, the only LVMH watch that I like is their
Tambour?
digital ones.
The digital ones? Yeah. Okay, yeah, those are cool.
Yeah.
And the earbuds and stuff, but those are cool. But yeah, now they're actually, what I have to say is that they have invested a huge amount in Geneva and new manufacturers and new research and development opportunities for watchmakers. So it's a plus, right? But at what cost? Consolidating and really taking these smaller entities and absorbing them in there.
Well, once you join such a big conglomerate, you have all their resources and the power of their marketing team, the power of just how much money they have to spend on this stuff, and it's kind of easy to grow that brand. So in 1998, he tried to do the same thing with Gucci.
Yes. So with PPR at the group. So here, I guess you have these three big men in the luxury sphere. So you have Johann Rupert, which is Groupe Financier Richemont. Then you have François Pinault, which is
exactly how I was going to say it.
Yeah, François Pinault, right? Which is prior to that it was PPR, and now it's called Kering. And then you have Bernard Arnault, which is LVMH. So yeah, he tried to do a hostile takeover of PPR at the time, and
they found out about it.
Yeah.
They fought hard, and they were able to deter his attempts. And again, I'm just trying to remember some of the stuff that I heard and read about it. It was like a fight, to the death, almost like. Oh yeah,
those two gentlemen, they're both Frenchmen, and François Pinault kind of has to. It's not at the level of an LVMH, so they're bitter rivals, bitter enemies, right? And even so, having worked in the luxury sphere, LV people don't get along with Kering people at all. So we we don't socialize. We don't.
That's funny.
Yeah. It's like really. Like one football team against another.
But it's funny because I think it was last year that Gucci was rated as like the top luxury brand, ever. It had more demand than LVMH, any one of their brands, which was surprising to me because Gucci, think back, 5-8 years ago, was kind of like a third, fourth, place player. It wasn't the top. And then their marketing efforts over the last few years, their ambassadors, their influencers really knocked it out of the park. And
honestly, there's been a tremendous transformation with this brand. I'll say it again. Gucci is for the people who enjoy life, who love life, right? Louis Vuitton is a little bit more serious, I would say. Gucci's great. You can't go wrong with it.
I will tell you that I prefer Gucci shoes to LVMH shoes.
Yeah.
Or to Louis Vuitton shoes. They're a lot more comfortable. I feel like Gucci knows how to make shoes.
They do. I mean, that's leather, like shoes and all of that. I guess that was always kind of in their DNA, where LVMH was more, Louis Vuitton was more bags and whatnot.
I mean, LVMH or Louis Vuitton actually started, creating, it started going into the fashion items and the ready-to-wear stuff just because Gucci got into it. Originally, they stuck to the trunks and the bags and all that stuff as well. One thing that you brought up, when we talked offline was that Arnault is, a very, very educated man, and he looks, his plan is 10, 15, 20 years ahead. It's not what we're doing tomorrow. It's what we're going to do next decade. which brought him to investing in the Chinese market heavily while everybody else was shying away from it. In the early 2000s, they dropped a lot of money into China, building retail spaces and really bringing up their brand, and that paid off tremendously for him.
Of course.
Both luxury, fashion as well as watches.
Yes, of course. I mean, the presence in China is huge, and in the early 2000s, it was still a little volatile. I would say the purchasing power wasn't there yet, and now their investment has really paid off dividends tenfold.
I mean, it's funny because looking back, you're like, well, why wouldn't you go into a space that has billions of people, with a lust for luxury? Sure, maybe in the early 2000s it wasn't as strong. They might have not had the same spending power, but relatively speaking, it was still great at that time. So it's funny that they invested so heavily into it, whereas Gucci or other luxury brands have not.
Well, I guess it helps also the fact that LVMH they also deal with spirits and wine. So I guess in terms of their logistical implementation of their different brands, I mean, they already have the resources there, whereas, Gucci is more so in fashion. But I mean, I think what I thought was funny is they only have one brand of Baijiu. Baijiu, it's like, it is the number one selling drink in China. So it's a very strong, like clear liquor. There's what is it called, Maotai, I think, which is the number one selling brand of any liquor in the world, right? It's billions upon billions. This is one red bottle, and but LVMH, they make their own there, and they do a lot of bottling there as well. So it's I guess spirits and luxury goods. I mean, they go hand in hand. I mean, you can't lose with that combination.
I guess that's true. That's why Moet, Hennessy, and let's talk about his family. So you brought up a point that there have been accusations of nepotism in relation to Arnault's children and their involvements in the business itself. Arnault's daughter. Who is she? What does she do?
So Delphine Arnault. So she's Bernard Arnault. So he has 4 children with 2 separate wives.
This is like an episode of Succession.
Yeah, it really is. That's when I was thinking about it. I was thinking about, I had the Succession music going on in my head while I was reading the notes for this episode. So she's actually being poised to take over LVMH. So Dior being kind of in French we say joujou, which is like the jewel of his whole portfolio. So now she was appointed CEO of this recently, and Bernard Arnault, he's 79 years old, so I think he's going to work until he can stop, but he's really looking at the next line of succession. So you have her, who is she's the CEO of Dior. Then you have Alexandre, who's CEO of Berluti, and then Loro Piana as well. Then you have the 2 youngest, Alexandre
and Antoine.
And Antoine, exactly. Antoine, who are, this is where the little bit of the controversy goes through, because I think they're in their younger 20s, and they're saying, well, look, there's so many more people who might have, worked their whole lives, right, to eventually, rise up within the organization, and to basically be undercut by...
It's not undercut. He built this for his family.
He built it for his family, and I'm sure that since, they've been born, they've been groomed to be in this
and who's going to care as much as his own children?
Of course. I mean, there's just some like, I guess people are just jumping on bandwagons to question some marketing decisions with, especially the brand like TAKEOVER, how it's being a bit dragged through the mud with all their collaborations with like Mario and just things that don't really make things that don't really make sense in the grander scheme and are a little bit more niche to a younger demographic, which I guess is who they're kind of going for. But there are a lot of smart people in this company. I know I'm sure they know what they're doing.
So the whispers of Richemont being next on his target list, obviously nobody really knows how true this is, but the fact that there are whispers means that it's a conversation that's been going on behind the scenes. Of course.
And I mean, this is near and dear to my heart, because I actually started my career in luxury at Cartier in their boutique in the Rue du Rhône, and that was just amazing. Just being able to go from learning like really theoretical stuff at GIA and in books to being really thrown in the gauntlet where you're seeing like priceless pieces, but for Elizabeth Taylor. Anyway, I digress. So This is.
Is this? Do you think this is strictly like he's limited to Cartier, or he wants the entire Richemont portfolio?
Honestly, I think he'd buy the world if
That's true.
If the regulatory.
I mean, look, Richemont has some significant brands.
I mean, so going from you have Vacheron Constantin, you have
Van Cleef,
you have
IWC.
Cartier, IWC, Baume & Mercier, you have
Piaget,
like,
Jaeger.
Yeah, I mean like I said, these are really two opposing titans, if you will. So if they were to come together, they would essentially corner the market. That's why I think there'd be a lot of regulatory pushback on any type of purchase. And he does have the money. He has the money.
Oh yeah.
But
he would acquire some high horology brands. I mean,
and I think that would complement.
Panerai, obviously, Jaeger. But he also acquires, if he does acquire Richemont, he acquires an outlet for these things with Watchfinder and Co.
Yeah. So there will be the retail arm as well. You'll have the manufacturing arm, which is Jaeger-LeCoultre being the watchmaker's watchmaker. There would be nothing there would be nothing in his way.
What do you think is his goal with, again, because the news that we heard was more specifically about Cartier. He wants Cartier because it would really work well with his brands. Obviously, Tiffany, Bulgari, these are the highest form brands, in jewelry. But at the same time, he does get all of these great watch brands.
Correct. So I think with Cartier, it would really give him the trifecta of a high watch brand. So not to forget Harry Winston, which is owned by Swatch Group, but here we'd have essentially Tiffany, which is very, very popular in the USA, Cartier, which is worldwide, and Bulgari, which I guess is really, central to the European, Italian jewelry. So, it would just be a compliment. There would be something for every buyer, essentially.
Let me ask you a question, just your opinion. We all saw the Tiffany, Patek Philippe collaboration. Why hasn't Richemont done a collaboration between Cartier and JLC, for example, or Cartier or Lang & Son? These are brands under their management. Why wouldn't, has there ever been a Cartier watch that has been has been collaborated with?
No.
Cartier makes their own watches. Obviously, they're great.
They do, but I'd say, I think the brand as itself is too valuable to be doing any.
You don't think Tiffany is?
They don't want to dilute it. No, I'd say Tiffany a bit less, right? Because even so, I have friends who work at Tiffany, and I've heard grumblings that it's not peaches and cream there. So there's a lot of there's a lot left to be desired in terms of growth, right? Whereas I think Cartier is just, the third most profitable brand in the watch and jewelry space. So I think it's like $13 billion a year, something crazy like that. But so I don't think they want to, muddle it too much.
I'm just wondering if it's the fact that Cartier produces watches themselves. Is that a turnoff from them putting Cartier on a Lang & Son or on a Panerai? But then again, take Van Cleef. Sure, they have a few high horology pieces that are mostly jewelry pieces. They're not known for their watches. How cool would it be to have a VCA collaboration with a watch brand?
Yeah. So I guess going into the fact of having a double signed piece, there's value in that. But I guess this goes back to their traditional collaboration between Patek and Tiffany. So. And what's interesting is that there are actually a lot of Patek salons that are closing. So you're only able to get Patek Tiffany in only a few select salons. I think in New York.
I think from Tiffany itself is the biggest source.
Yeah, it's the biggest source. But the Tiffany salons, right? So they're actually closing down a lot of them. So I don't know if this is kind of foreshadowing the end of this arrangement, or if it's they're just trying to consolidate power.
Me being the marketing genius that I am, I think that if I was Bernard Arnault or one of his top executives, I would have said, hey, Tiffany and Patek has been working really well for lots of years. Why don't we try something new? Why don't we do Cartier and IWC? Why don't we try to do VCA and Jaeger? Why not try to do a double signed, limited release? It could potentially be a collectible.
that would there's an Instagram page, I think it's called The Wrong Watch, where they kind of put a Rolex logo on a IWC Schaffhausen, and some of the results are actually pretty nice. Shout out to The Wrong Watch. But it's honestly, you're the marketeer, so I can't say.
Would you, if you saw one today, if you saw an IWC that's double branded with Van Cleef and Arpels, for example. It might actually have like a little Alhambra on the dial, or the clasp, or something to kind of
super limited run.
Yeah,
that would actually be pretty rad.
I think it would be pretty cool, right?
Yeah, that would be cool. I know that like in the horology, so you have like a lot of like collaborations. Like you'll have like maybe a specific watchmaker that will work on something, and that kind of gives it a desirability. But something that's a bit more appealable to the masses. Yeah, I think that would definitely work in their benefit.
Well, you heard it here first. If it does happen, it's because
we got to credit them.
Episode. Yeah, I want royalty for this stuff. How likely do we think this is going to happen?
So they're going to have to jump through a lot of regulatory loopholes and hurdles, right? This is going to be tough. And also, I don't think Mr. Johann Rupert, I don't think he wants to relinquish power as well, because that's basically his legacy. He didn't build the brand from the ground up, but he's babied it and nurtured it to a point where it's unstoppable.
Yeah, but for the right price.
For the right price. No, we spoke about this even before. Mr. Stern of Patek Philippe, it's a family-owned business. He said, if they offer me $10 billion, I'm not relinquishing power. So I think for these these strong men in the luxury goods industry, I think all of this supersedes a dollar amount. It really belongs to legacy, and also, it's also, no one wants to get away from the table. No one wants to cash out and then walk away from the table, because what are you going to do after that?
That's true.
You already have the money. I mean, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I guess that's true. It is a legacy, and it is taking it to its limits is what's keeping them young.
For sure. What are you going to do? Retire on the beach? No.
Yeah, coming to the office every day and coming, trying to come up with ideas for what are we doing next? How are we doing it? I remember at one point I had an investor who didn't need the money, but he just invested in my company because he just wanted to be young. He wanted to, keep the wheels turning, and it makes sense now. All right, David, thank you so much for joining me. Guys, girls, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, please show some love. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you write a review, like, comment. We want to get your support, and we'll continue doing this every day as much as we possibly can. We're putting in the time. We're putting in the effort. All we ask for is a little bit of support. Thank you very much. We will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Thank you, David.
Thank you.